Since 2012, one of the bulldogs that has been holding the IRS accountable is the congressman from Central Florida, Mr. Ron DeSantis. At this point, I yield time to the representative.
Well, I thank my friend from North Carolina. You know, if you're a taxpayer and you become subject to an IRS audit, you've got to prove and justify what you submitted to the IRS. If you tell the IRS, you know, I don't really have those documents, they were destroyed, nothing I can do, let's just move along, I don't think most IRS agents are going to accept that. And I think the taxpayer would likely find themselves in hot water. And so I think it's really unacceptable that the IRS seems to think it could operate under a totally different standard than the standard that it imposes on American taxpayers. We've been going through this now since 2013, Lois Lerner and the targeting scandal, trying to get more information. John Koskinen, the IRS commissioner last year before Congress, said, we are going to produce Lois Lerner's emails. We'll produce all of them. We have nothing to hide. Well, then a couple months later, he said, well, actually, Lois Lerner's emails, most of them are destroyed because, you see, they're held on these backup tapes, and we recycle the backup tapes, we destroy the tapes, so there's just nothing we can do here, so we're just going to move along and we're not going to participate in any meaningful way with your investigation. Most Americans didn't accept that, and it really wasn't worth the paper it was printed on in terms of an excuse, and it was obviously much different than what the IRS would impose on a taxpayer. But it was even more than that. It was more than just a weak excuse. It was false. Once Koskinen said that the emails were destroyed, guess what? The Inspector General for Tax Administration and the Treasury Department did basic due diligence and said, you know what, I'm going to check to see whether Koskinen is telling the truth. And so what did the IG do? Drove out to West Virginia, where they have the warehouse of all the backup tapes. What did they find? The Lois Lerner emails on the backup tapes. They were there the whole time. So now they've pulled thousands and thousands of Lois Lerner emails, and these are emails that are, in many cases, different than the emails that the IRS begrudgingly produced to Congress and to the American people. And so this is a major, major issue. Of course, the targeting, but then the lengths that the IRS has gone to stymie Congress's investigation. Just this week in federal court, they're fighting Judicial Watch. They don't want to turn over even these new emails that the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration provided to the IRS. They're saying, well, we can't turn them now in the course of the litigation. We're not going to turn them over to Congress because we need to check to see whether there are any duplicates from the emails that we've already turned over. Really? Who cares? Give us the emails, give the American people the truth. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to stonewall and drag this out as long as they can, hoping that the American people will forget about it, and then basically they get away scot-free with nobody in their organization being held accountable. I think it's a test of this institution here in the Congress about whether somebody like Commissioner Koskinen is going to be held to account for misleading Congress, for providing false information to Congress. And the fact of the matter is, an American taxpayer, if they were hauled in front of a federal grand jury or in federal court and they gave testimony like that that was not true, they would face consequences. You can bet your bottom dollar. And so I think the IRS is kind of the grossest example that we have in Washington of really a fundamental problem with how our government operates, and that is the people that work and operate in and around Washington, D.C. You know, Washington, D.C., 6 of the 10 wealthiest counties in our country are now suburbs of Washington, D.C. Now, we're not producing shale here. We don't have technology, nothing in Washington. It's all because of the power and growth of government. And so people inside the Beltway are not held accountable. And you have people at the IRS, you have people at the EPA, you have people in all these different agencies, and essentially they're allowed to operate under a lower standard of conduct than what an American taxpayer or citizen would be allowed or permitted to do by the government. That is unacceptable, and so I think that this IRS issue is as important of government accountability issue as we're facing in this Congress. I think it's a test of whether we're going to be serious about this and hold these IRS officials accountable. I'm glad my friend from North Carolina had the time here today. I think it was very productive to listen to some of the other members, and I just want the American people to know I am committed to getting to the bottom of this and to holding these people accountable, not only for the targeting, but for obstructing the investigation, and when it has been obstructed over and over again. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman DeSantis.